Hey folks, so the purpose of this video is to give a bit of a general guide really on how to improve your conservation credit balance. I'm just going to go through what I've been doing and give some perhaps hints and tips, and maybe it'll help you improve your balance. So sit back and hopefully this helps you. So one thing that's important to check when you're starting off and deciding what kind of animals you want is the species data tab in the zoopedia. From here you can see the age that the animal is expected to live to, you can see their sexual maturity, the sterility, number of offspring per mating event, gestation period, and the interbirth period. So these are all really important stats, and on the African buffalo, they're not the greatest, to be honest. Something like the wild dog will give you a many more babies, and the peacock even more still. So the key thing to look at here is the life expectancy, the number of mating per event, sexual maturity age, sexual sterility age, and from that, as well as the interbirth period and the length of the gestation itself, you can kind of figure out that some are going to breed much more rapidly than others. Some will have many more babies in their lifetime. The African buffalo is going to have probably 3 babies in its lifetime for a female. You can work this out because the life expectancy is about 22, but the sterility is the important part. You only have 10 years where it's able to have a baby, and so it's probably going to have 3 in that time because you add the gestation period to the interbirth period, which equals 3 years. So what you want is an animal that breeds a lot but also sells well. So if you look at African buffalo, there's only 3 on there, elephants, only 2 on there, so you can charge higher prices for these animals. Things like the wild dogs, while they do breed faster, they don't sell for as much. Now, ordinarily wild dogs are even cheaper than this, so currently the market's looking good for those. But if we do switch to the Indian peafowl, you can actually see that when I sort it by price at least, you can see that they sell for much lower. Now this is okay when you're starting because that means just about every peacock that you breed, and you'll get about 3 a year per female peacock, is going to give you 3 or 4 conservation credits back. And that's not too shabby when you're just starting off. You can easily build up to your first extra 100 conservation credits within just a few years of game time. So I think the first thing to make note of is not to let them breed unchecked. Now there are a few ways to find out exactly who you have in your habitat. The first is to literally click on the wall itself, and then that actually brings you up a nice list, as you can see here. The other way that you can actually do this is if you go to zoo at the bottom, and then you can actually bring up an animals list and you can sort those. If you do it first by maturity, then by gender, and then location, you are actually able to see a big long list sorted by gender and the age of the animals in the specific habitat. This is actually quite useful for just seeing how many things you have of each thing, really. The issue with this is that it doesn't show easily, at least, how good your animal is. So it doesn't show you whether it's bronze, silver, or plain. You don't really have that information. You do have an appeal stat, but it's not particularly helpful. From here you can release to the wild. You can select a few and do that. You can also send them to the trade center that way as well. But the final way of selecting, finding out what you have in each pen is just by literally going through and clicking them all. Now the best way that I've found to breed, you have your basics, you have your bronze, you have your silver, you have your gold, and the best ones are generally the gold ones. Quickest way to get rid of animals that aren't worth very much is to just throw them in with some bigger animals. So in this instance I'm using lions. So what I'm doing here is just going through them all, picking the ones that aren't gold and then moving them into the lion enclosure. This is only something you can really do once you reach the stage where you've got lots of them, and it's obviously not something that I'd recommend doing from the get-go, because you do need a bunch of females and males to breed and make you more babies. You're not here just to throw away your animals, you're here to make some conservation credits. So what's the best way to sell one of your animals? Well, if we move our animal to the trade center, and then either you can choose release to the wild, that'll gain you some credits, but probably the better way for most animals is to trade. Now, I found that you can actually highlight the trade price, and that way you can set it to yourself. The slider is very finicky and it won't go to what you need. It goes from 0 to 10,000, and it's very difficult to pick something specific. But the best way to find out what you want to sell and the price to set it at is to find the species on the animal market, sort out in a filter, sort it by price, and then see what similar animals are going for. Now, people that have played MMOs for years will understand that the best way to make a quick sale is to find one similar to yours and then put it at one conservation credit cheaper. So we'll take our Indian peafowl, we'll go to trade, we will highlight the price, and then we'll change that to one below, and then we'll put it up for sale. Now, that's for conservation credits. That's not going to get you far, for very long at least, but when you're starting out, you start out with only sort of 100 conservation credits. You know, that's 4% of your entire worth. Every action giving you 4%, that's a big boost. Obviously you're going to move on to bigger animals, but for now, it's a good way to start. So in this section we're going to talk a little bit about the buying process. I've talked about how you sell things. I talked about what to look for, what kind of animal you want. If you do decide that you want elephants, that's fair enough. Let's go ahead and purchase ourselves an elephant. So we go into the market, we select elephant. Ordinarily we'd order it by price, but there just aren't many there, as you can see, just 4. And now there's even less, just 3 elephants on there. So let's check the elephants one by one. The first one, actually not too bad for a first one. 23 years old, but elephants do live to 65. So that's good. The ones underneath it, however, a little bit older, 39, still got 20 years ahead of it. And the one beneath that, 27, but it's going to cost you 4,000. So let's check the African elephant stats. Now if we look at the species data, we can see where I got that information from. 65 years for male and female. The age of sexual maturity is 15, and the age of sterility is death. So potentially you've got, like 50 years where it can breed, and that's great. So with that in mind, we head back to our market, back onto our elephants. Actually, there's a couple of more here, that's great. One thing to notice with these is these are actually listed by Frontier Zoo. That's Frontier themselves. Now these only have a listing time of 10 minutes. They're not on there long, they're just there to essentially prop up the market so that there isn't a drought in elephants. The elephants aren't actually too bad. You can see the fertility genes there, 50%. Which is about as good as the older one that we were just considering buying, except this one is much cheaper. The other options, as I mentioned before, 39 years old, Fertility only 33%, so not as good. So even though you've got, you know, an expensive animal there, it's older, fertility is kind of pants. The one at the bottom, actually not too bad, but it's a very high price to pay. So I think what we'll do is we will take this one here, and we'll click adopt, and then we will move it into our zoo. And so there are actually two ways of doing that. We can click move and move it directly into our zoo, or it will sit in our trade center for a while and then we can move it from there into our zoo. But what we'll do is we'll wait to have a look at our new elephant. And there we go, a lovely specimen. So there are two key points to take away from this. One of them is age. You can check the age of that an animal lives to when it becomes sterile if you check the zoopedia. You want to make sure that you're getting something that's going to have a lot of life in it and a lot of opportunities to breed before it becomes sterile and unable to breed anymore. And the second thing related to breeding is of course fertility. Now you do not want to buy an elephant, spend all your money on it, and find out that it's infertile. That would suck. There are a lot of infertile elephants on there. You do not want these. So always check the age of the elephant, or indeed the age of any animal you buy, and also the fertility. Because you just don't want to be throwing your money away. And it's so easy to do if you're not really, well versed on what to look for. You're just probably going to pick the cheapest thing you find. So do keep that in mind. Age and fertility. And again, check the zoopedia. Make sure that your animal has plenty of years ahead of it. Those rules count for animals bought with conservation credits. But also, what happens if you don't have any yet? One of the first things that you can do is look for animals that are being sold for dollars. Now these are put up by Frontier Zoo itself, but you can't actually resell them onto the market and get conservation credits for them. You can't release them to the wild either, as it says in the message there, but you can adopt them for the cash money, and usually you start off with a bit more cash money than you do conservation credits. Now, the other thing about these animals, what is potentially a bug, or I don't know if it's intended or not, is that it doesn't actually show the appeal of those animals. So some of them, if you check the stats, are actually quite good. Now, we've just purchased a African buffalo. It's a female. We needed more females, and it was literally only $300. Now, the buffaloes themselves, as you just seen, can go for potentially even thousands of conservation credits, and you can't sell this one directly, but you can sell its offspring. Now that it's arrived, we can actually see it's actually a bronze, so that's actually pretty good. If we could flip it, which we couldn't, we can only sell the babies, we would make a pretty penny. So that's a good way to start off if you don't have a lot of conservation credits. Okay folks, you've made it through to the end of part 1. This is going to be a 2-part thing. It was just going to be one whole thing, but it's really quite long and there's actually a lot I want to get through. So do come back, because I am going to be talking about the alpha status, the different family makeups, things like lions and bears, tapirs, hippos, lots of welfare stuff, talking about shelter and traversable areas and how you can manage those filters better as well. All in the aid of hopefully making you more conservation credits. So do come back, check that out. Hopefully this has been informative so far. Have a great evening, morning, day, wherever you are. Cheers, bye.